listener production.
I'm automotive commentator and journalist Greg Rust, and this is Rusty's Garage. In this episode, we're visiting someone's garage that's just a bit bigger than your average two-car lockup. Well, a lot bigger actually. We're inside the biggest garage you can get, an airplane hangar. I'm at Lake Macquarie Airport on the Central Coast, north of Sydney, which is home base for Matt Hall when he's not travelling around the world. Matt's a distinguished Australian pilot, a Top Gun, and our first representative in the Red Bull Air Race World Series. I have great admiration for people who make their passion their occupation, but for most, this realisation comes later in life. Not so for Matt, which is all the more impressive.
It struck me at a very young age, actually, that I'd go to all these flying clubs and gliding clubs, and I'd see all these old men that are out there on the weekend doing what they want, and I realised they were living for the weekend. They hated their Monday to Friday and lived for the week, and I thought, they've got it all the wrong way around, you know. Why wouldn't you actually have a job that you can't wait for Monday so you can go and do your job again? So that's what I've pursued in my life, and it's really worked out.
You're a third-generation pilot, if memory serves me correctly, so flying is in the bloodlines. Your grandfather flew in World War II, is that right?
Yeah, it's correct. My granddad, he was a pilot in World War II. He didn't follow through with flying after the war, let his pilot's ratings lapse. But my dad then got his licence as a teenager, and then I flew with him while I was growing up, and I got my licence as a teenager.
What planes can you recall them either talking about or actually seeing them fly in those junior years for you?
Yeah, well, my granddad, I never saw him fly an aircraft, but he used to talk about, you know, his training in Tiger Moths, and then he was flying Avro Ansons. He was actually going on to Beaufords with the plan to end up on Beaufighters when the war finished. With my dad, we spent a lot of time. Yeah, he's a general aviation pilot, so not a commercial pilot, but we spent a lot of time, you know, doing towing gliders in old crop dusters and things like that, and that's the grassroots flying is really what I got involved in with my heritage.
So what are those early memories of flying in addition to that for you? Was there a moment for Matt Hall when you saw something your dad was doing, or perhaps others that you admired, and you went, this is for me, I really want to pursue this? Yeah,
there's a couple of things that came to my brain early on. So obviously I liked being around planes, and I didn't really know anyone that flew planes for a job. And then I went to an air show in the mid-'80s. So, you know, I was probably 11, 12 years old. And
Here in Australia?
Here in Australia, at Williamtown, actually. And there were two things that occurred there. There was I saw a guy called Frank Fry who was flying an aerobatic plane, and he was doing an air show demonstration. And the things he did in the plane, I thought, wow, you know, look at that. That guy has got absolute control of that plane, and it doesn't really seem to matter where the sky and the ground are. He just makes the plane do what he wants. I thought, imagine being able to do that. And the other thing I saw was the Mirage and the Hornet had just arrived in Australia, and they put it on a demo. And for me, those aircraft were like magical flying carpets. I couldn't even imagine that there's a pilot in those aircraft. It was like these were science fiction machines, and there was a robot inside them. I couldn't. Yeah, it's just hard to believe there's somebody experiencing the flight in the fighter, and that set forth a bit of a chain in my head of being able to fly planes that could operate in what most people consider unrealistic flight envelopes, and being able to do it for a job in the military would be an amazing thing to do.
We'll talk more about that in a moment, because the Hornet played a significant part of your early life. Your first solo flight, though, was before most of us even have a car licence. I think you were 15 and in a glider, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I started my flying training when I was 14, and I went solo at 15. And my first solo was pretty special, actually, because my dad was you get towed up by a tow plane when you're in the glider, and
so did he take you up?
He took me up. So yeah, we did I didn't even know my solo was coming up, so I did a check flight with an instructor. My dad towed me up on that one. Then I landed, and then the instructor said, stay in the glider, you're going solo, straight after I landed. And my dad taxied up in the plane. He's looking in there going, he looks like he's in there on his own. He says on the radio, you solo? I'm like, yep. And then, my dad towed me up, and after I released the rope, he came and flew along next to me. It was the first time my dad and I had been separate aircraft, both of us solo. It was quite amazing.
Very cool. You get your aircraft pilot's license at age 18. What sort of things were you flying back then? Was it Cessnas? What kind of planes?
Yeah, so I continued to do my gliding because that was the cheapest and also the youngest aircraft you're allowed to fly. My dad bought an ultralight and he taught me to fly that. So then I had some power experience, but that was flying with a little lawnmower engine basically and some fabric. And then I started hang gliding because that in Newcastle it's an amazing spot for hang gliding. So that's quite cheap as well because there's no fuel involved. So I was doing a bit of that. And then as I was finishing school, I was able to convert those licenses and hours into pre-recognised experience to get a what most people would consider your normal pilot's license, and started flying Cessnas and smaller aerobatic planes, and also started with the gliding company that, or the gliding club that I was already flying with, and towing the gliders with the old retired crop duster. So at 18 years old, I was actually flying quite a range of aircraft, but doing it on the cheap through using my contacts and using my experience.
So some kids at that stage might be kind of supplementing their schooling by working at Kmart or doing paper runs or whatever it might be. Am I right in saying that you were flying? Is that while you're still at school?
Yeah. It was pretty funny actually because I'd go to school and everyone's talking about, hey, look at this cool record I've just bought, or just bought a new record player, or hey, I'm gonna go to the beach on the weekend and hang out and buy hamburgers. And I'd be like, I'm not spending a cent because I've got to save every dollar I can while I'm at school so I can go flying on the weekend. So it was a different sort of lifestyle in that regard. But I'm a big believer that there's no dream that's ever too big. You just got to find a way to make it happen.
So that dream then leads you, or you start venturing toward a career in the military, and mate, you achieve some remarkable things there. I mean, ultimately, Dux of the Hornet and fighter combat courses, fighter pilot of the year, over 1,500 hours in an FA-18. What is that beast like to fly?
Yeah, it's a pretty cool plane. As I was saying earlier, when I was younger, I was looking at it going, surely there's not a human being in that cockpit because it just looks so out of control. And then the first time you get to fly it, I was quite young, and the power of the aircraft. It's people have seen drag races between Hornets and F1 cars and everything, and while an F1 will out accelerate a Hornet off the mark, the thing what a Hornet does is when it passes through 300 knots, which is about 550 kilometres an hour, it's just starting to get its stride, and it actually gets more efficient at that speed. So as you pass through 300 knots, you get a kick in the back as it accelerates even harder, and that's what actually messes with your brain, because in every other form of machinery in the world, as you're accelerating, you start accelerating and then the acceleration backs off as you're starting to approach your terminal velocity in cars and motorbikes and everything. Whereas with jets and rockets, you actually accelerate harder the faster you go. So it just doesn't feel right. And when you're not used to it, it actually feels wrong. It feels like something's going to go wrong because it's like everything's losing control. So it's an amazing plane, to be able to point your nose straight up and climb to above airline heights from on the ground level, just vertically, to see the things we've seen and fly in formations with your best friends in the world is an absolutely amazing career.
There's a level of preparation, serious level of preparation, both mentally and physically, in order to do that, and you wear certain equipment that assists with the incredible G-forces that you're subjected to in those sort of moments, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. So in the Hornets are 7.5G aircraft. I also flew F-15s, which is a 9G aircraft. The average person passes out around about 4G if they're not trained how to do it. So we're trained to stay conscious through a number of breathing and straining techniques, but we also wear a G suit over the top of our flying suit, which fills with compressed air basically, and restricts blood flow in our legs under G, because the reason people can pass out is the blood comes out of their head under the G and pools in their lower limb. So if you've got this special pair of trousers that blow up with high pressure air and restrict the blood flow in your legs, the blood's got nowhere to pool apart from in your upper body, and hopefully enough to keep you conscious. And then on top of that, we're also wearing an oxygen mask to keep us alive at the high altitudes, a helmet mounted sight so that we can use our weapon systems. Wear night vision goggles that are attached to our helmet as well, and then a survival vest that we wear. Not just in combat, we wear it on every flight, because if you eject over water, you've got to be able to survive and have all your location aids. So you walk out to these fighters, wearing a lot of gear, and it's all designed to keep you alive in what's really a hostile environment. At 50,000 feet.
Was there a moment for you? I mean, let's just sort of recap that for a second. We're talking twin engine, supersonic. They're worth about $29 million or something at the peak of their career. There, top speed, as you said, just under Mach 2, about 1900 k's an hour. Was the young man who was spellbound up the road at Williamtown pinching himself when you finally got to fly one of those for the first time?
Yeah, for sure. It was one of those things, so you're growing up, you see Top Gun, you're like, man, that's I want to do that. You end up on the Hornet, and you spend the first 5 years of your career looking over your shoulder, wondering when they're going to figure it out that you'd actually do this for free, and they're paying me to do it. So you're sort of waiting for the bill to turn up, like, oh, here's your bill for like $30 million worth of flying. Because it is, it's one of those things that I still can't believe they said, here's a jet fighter. We're even going to paint your name on the side of this $30 million jet fighter and go and do as much flying as you can. It's like, really?
Also on the CV, Royal Australian Air Force Fighter Combat Top Gun instructor, DUX. Tell me, mate, that you weren't riding a motorbike to work with leather jacket and Ray-Bans and things like that.
Yeah, if I could have got away with that without my mates giving me curry, I probably would have ridden the bike to work. But it is one of those things that, when I saw Top Gun when I was a 15-year-old, and you go, man, that's imagine people actually get to do that. And then, I set my sights on doing our own Top Gun course, and, I was able to do well on it and actually became the chief instructor at our Top Gun school. There's a little bit of a touch of ego in it, but the ego is really drummed out of military pilots very quickly, because like that line in Top Gun, it's you can't have people ego writing checks they can't cash, because you're dealing with a lot of equipment, and if anyone ever puts their ego ahead of a right decision, it's going to go horribly wrong very quickly. So it was pretty cool to have the responsibility of being in my 20s. I was already a Top Gun instructor, and being able to carry that mantle and represent Australia, not just within Australia, but also take that award of being a Top Gun instructor and using that overseas for certain items there as well.
You probably can't tell me specifics, but there has been combat flying too, mate, hasn't there, in places like Iraq. How daunting was that? How serious was that in looking back on your career so far?
Yeah, so I ended up, I was on an exchange program in the US flying F-15 Strike Eagles, which are an amazing aircraft. And while I was there, that was when Operation Iraqi Freedom occurred. So I ended up as an Australian officer embedded in a US squadron flying the F-15 in Operation Iraqi Freedom. So downtown missions, down over Baghdad, and getting shot at, and all sorts of things. And it's one of those things that I'm glad I was a part of it. I'm not for war. I'd love nothing more that if we didn't need defence forces around the world, but unfortunately there's always people out there that want to take advantage of other people. So defence forces are needed, and that's what I was needed to do at the time. It's a life-changing event. There's no doubt about that. To go and work with a coalition force, work with your best mates. It's I guess on a sporting level, the way you could put it is like being in the state of origin. You're going to get, some of your mates are going to get hurt, and you're not doing it for any reward personally. You're doing it for the team, and the team was the rest of the world at the time saying we've got to stop this occurring, and to be part of that team is an amazing feeling, but it comes with it comes with baggage as well. Everyone that ends up in combat ends up coming out at some stage having to deal with what they've been involved in, what they've seen, what they've done, and the loss of friends, which I did lose a few friends in that conflict.
You were awarded the Air Medal and Air Medal First Oak Leader for operational services there in Iraq. I want to come back to the Strike Eagle because you brought that up a moment ago. Multi-role fighter jet. You were entrusted with a $31 million piece of equipment. What is it, mate? Correct me if I'm wrong here. 2 Pratt & Whitney jet engines, afterburning turbofans, range up to nearly 4,000 Ks and capable of 3,000 Ks an hour, Mach 2.5. That is mighty.
Yeah, the Eagle. People ask me if I miss the military, and on the flying side, I don't really miss the Hornet because I've I had enough time in the Hornet to do everything I needed to. But I do miss the Eagle. Absolutely amazing plane. It's a big aircraft, has a lot of power. I saw some amazing things in it. A lot of firepower, huge amount of firepower, and for just on the engine side, because I know a lot of people like engine details. There was one time I was running on the deck in an exercise in an F-15. I was doing about 750 knots at 100 foot off the ground. So we're looking at around about 1,300 kilometres an hour, about 100 feet. In the middle of the desert, like near Area 51, and my fuel flow at the time was 110,000 pounds of fuel per engine, so 220,000 pounds of fuel an hour going out the back end. So do the maths on that.
That is nuts. That's wild. Let's move to aerobatics, because on the CV is also a National Advanced Aerobatics Championship. When did that start? What drew you to that? Was it something that always kind of ticked along as you were doing some of the military stuff? Yeah,
it's sort of, I dropped out of doing any of the grassroots type flying when I got into the military. I sort of put all of my efforts and all of my my thought processes, and basically 24/7 I immersed myself in being the best fighter pilot I could be. And it basically came about after I got back from the combat operations when I was living in America. I had a little bit of a downer almost. You go, well, I've just come out of combat, I survived, lost some friends. What's next? What do I do? Surely I haven't just peaked at age 30. That's the highest point of my life. I'm not saying that going in combat is the highest point, but the most, the pinnacle of performance is in combat really for any Defence Force person. So what do I do now to challenge myself? And so I bought a little aerobatic plane in America.
What was it?
It was called an Acrosport, a little 2-seat open cockpit biplane. And I thought, I'm going to go to a competition. So I bought this plane. I rocked up to a competition and said, I want to go in the competition. And they're like, okay. Do you know what you're doing? I said, I can do a loop and a roll. And then so I did it, and they're like, oh, that's completely bad. You didn't do any of the things we're looking for judging. And that's when I realised there's a whole set of rules with doing a competition. It's they try and make it as objective as possible, even though it is being judged. So I brushed up my skills and then won the next competition and went, what, maybe I can actually do this. That was kind of fun. So I started buying some bigger and better aerobatic planes, and that just sort of progressed in parallel on the weekends with my military career.
In 2009, you make your debut in the Red Bull Air Race World Series. There's a plane taking off in the background, super timing, or landing, I should say. That kind of blended the two things, didn't it? Because it brought all your aerobatic skills, but the fast manoeuvring, the racing aspect as well, which clearly appeals to you.
Yeah, it was... the head of the sport in 2009, after I did my first race, he summed it up and said, this sport was made for me, which it really did seem that at the time, because I'd always pushed myself very hard in the military. I was used to pulling a lot of G. I was used to flying high performance aircraft. I was used to low flying at high speeds. I was also used to being able to control my emotions and stress levels. I'd been in combat, I'd been shot at, but I was still able to perform my job. And I found I was quite good at being able to keep my brain compartmentalised when the heat was on. In fact, to the point where I would often be able to perform at my peak level when I'm under immense pressure was actually where I had my best performances. So being able to take really that whole military mindset and the physical experience of what I'd done in the flying and combine that into a world performance sport using aircraft seemed a natural fit, and that's exactly how it went down. I had to do some more training, aerobatic training, and qualify through aerobatic competitions. And I did okay in those aerobatic competitions, but where I actually excelled was when I stepped the next level out of the aerobatic competitions and went to racing competitions. That's where I really found my stride, and it really did fit like a glove.
I'm probably reluctant to ask it, really. I don't ask it of a lot of racing people, be it bike races or car races either. Scariest moment for you in that air race competition? Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's the scariest moment in racing. I have actually hit the surface of the Earth, which is as a pilot, it's never something you want to do. It wasn't scary at the time. It was more scary straight after it. I think most motorsport guys, and in fact most people in the world, have been in a situation where things have gone horribly wrong very quickly. Some members of the human race put their hands in the air and freak out. Other people that are generally control freak type personalities like me, when it's going wrong, you don't actually have time to get upset or panic or be scared. You accept where you're at, and you think of everything you can do to minimise the bad result, which is exactly what happened. So I G-stalled in a low-level turn, rolled the plane on its back. I realised straight away I was going to crash, and I was able to get the plane flying again, get it rolled back upright. So this all happened at about 30 feet. Get it rolled back upright. I hit both wingtips in the water in the recovery and the landing gear. I tore some parts off the plane and bounced, was able to gather up what was left during the bounce and stop it hitting the water again, and then miss the crowd and fly away. And that all, from the stall until coming back out of the water, was 0.6 of a second. So it all happened very quick. But once again, it's like all professional motorsport people. You end up, time slows down, and what seems to have happened in a very slow process, when you watch it in replay, you go, geez, that happened quick.
In the first qualifying session of Race 4 in Windsor, Ontario, Australian pilot Matt Hall, after a strong early section in the track, stalled his plane to face a dramatic situation.
And the final big challenge, level through this blue gate, hard left to the chicane.
Oh! And a skim off the water! What an amazing recovery! Matt Hall, way too low, skimming the wing in the water, but just pulls the plane up in time.
Mate, cleared hold 3. Just have a look at your tail cam.
I came through the gate 13, I believe it is, with too great an angle to the chicane, and then I broke one of my own rules. I actually looked into the turn, which means I don't fly the aircraft naturally. I pulled on it. I've G-stalled the aircraft, which has rolled me slightly past the knife edge. I've managed to get it back to wings level and recover. I believe I might have skipped twice on the water because I felt 2 impacts, flew it away, and then obviously it was all just trying just to get it back on the ground safely. Everyone was okay.
Yeah, thank God it was Matt Hall. There's a guy that was pushing hard, stalled the airplane, and he's one of the best pilots on the planet, and that's why he is where he is now, landing back safely at this airport.
So the scariest part was afterwards, realising what I'd just been through, and then playing out what's still going to happen. Is the plane going to keep flying? Can I land it? Am I going to have to bail out? My wife's and my son are down there watching. That was a big factor in my head. They're on the ground watching me at the moment. They've just seen me crash, and no one knows what's going to happen in the next 30 seconds, including me. So it was still a process I was going through, but it was definitely the fear of unknown started to creep in pretty hard at that point. I thought I'd probably lost half of my prop. I thought my prop had been in the water, so I thought the engine was basically cooking itself and it was about to blow up. So I was actually preparing to bail out straight away. I gave it like 30 seconds. Okay, I've got the engine in control. Then I got Nigel Lamb, one of the other competitors, and up against me and the helicopter, and they had a look around, said, you're missing some landing gear components. Your gear might come off. So then it's like, okay, I think I'm going to be able to fly the plane, but it's probably going to end up on its belly when I land, which can break your back basically on these planes if the gear comes off on landing. So, it was one of those things, you keep going through it. I wouldn't say my heart rate really got up. I was more disappointed in myself for allowing myself to end up in that situation. My heart rate didn't get up until really after I landed, and then it hit home. It was like, okay, I'm unharmed, the plane's damaged, and my career is a mess. And then my wife turned up, and it's like, uh-oh.
How was she?
She was really good, actually. She's ex-military as well. She was a flight surgeon in the military and actually responsible for crash investigations. So she gets it. She realises that we're not doing normal aviation. We're in a motorsport, and motorsport involves taking calculated risks. You don't try and crash your plane, don't try and crash your car when you're racing. But it's not that like you're just driving down the road. It's not like I'm taking the family for a fly when I'm in a racetrack. We are flying with a lot of safety equipment based on the fact that the chances of a crash are much higher than normal aviation. So she gets that. She also understood that we needed to dig down and find out what went wrong, rather than just shrugging our shoulders and saying, I hope that doesn't happen again. So someone less understanding would have said, that's it, no more, whereas she said, well, obviously something went wrong, let's find out what it was and fix it.
So getting back on the horse, because you are the kind of person who is of that military background and you compartmentalise, did that process happen fairly simply? You ticked all the boxes in terms of understanding what went wrong, knowing that you could prevent it from happening again, etc., and move on?
Yeah, very much so. It's it was definitely a process. I had to make an initial decision, and that was the hardest decision to make. That I had to go and look at myself in the mirror, and straight after it happened, and like really, they say, look in the hall of mirrors. I actually had to look at myself in the mirror and challenge myself, because my initial instinct was embarrassment. It's like, I want to go and hide from all this and want to run away and say, that was really embarrassing and I'm lucky to have survived and everything.
Because you're a perfectionist.
Yeah, exactly, because I'm a perfectionist and I hate making errors. So I had to stare myself down and challenge myself. That's like, the rest of my life will be based around the decision I'm going to make in the next 30 seconds. So I went, are you going to run away and hide, or are you going to take this, learn from it, improve not only my system but improve the safety of the air race and everybody by coming up with what went wrong and implementing it? And it was a challenge, because straight after it you just want to go and crawl into bed and suck your thumb. So I pushed myself, and then after we made that decision, then it was write down a process of what we're going to go through, what we're going to analyse, and how deep we're going to dig, because you can always dig deeper, and at some point you've got to go, right, there is the root evil of what happened, and that's the core of what we've got to fix. And in the end we found 3 cores we had to fix, and once we fixed them, it was very, very easy to get back on the horse, because you go, right, they're the 3 problems we had, and we fixed them, let's go.
This is Greg Rust, and you're listening to Rusty's Garage. More with Matt Hall in a moment. In this series, I speak to some of the most passionate riders, drivers, designers and collectors I know, like Mark Skaife, the legendary Australian touring car racer, Supercars Hall of Famer and Bathurst great, who opens up on some of the heavy financial burden he experienced during a tumultuous period as a team owner.
The demands around shortening my driving career were consequential to all of those external business demands around being able to write enough sponsorship and being able to operate, a high-level team. Bloody hard.
Listen to the full episode with Mark Skaife here on Rusty's Garage.
That'll buff right out. An ironic comment made about a person's vehicle that has suffered irreparable damage, suggesting it can be fixed when it clearly can't. Hilarious to those around them, not so funny for the owner of the destroyed vehicle.
Air Race is a tremendous series because you go to some spectacular locations around the world. You bring flying to the people above harbours and iconic locations, racing among the pylons, and there's a real art to that blends your skills, but also lots of great motor racing things. I mean, these are finely tuned machines, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so. Like, the air race started in 2003. I think the first air race was in Italics, which was just a couple of guys with their stock aerobatic planes going, hey, let's race around some pylons. Yeah, just having fun in a paddock, and then it grew from there. It's like, I guess, V8 supercars, where we have to base our race aircraft off a production plane, and the production plane I'm using is a Zivco Edge at the moment. The original Zivco Edge, if you buy it from the factory, for example, performance-wise, it'll do maybe 180 knots straight and level, whereas ours will do 235 knots straight and level. So it's really pushing things up another notch. Every single thing on the aircraft is there for a purpose of racing. So we no longer have things that are there for aerobatics. So in aerobatics, you want a nice canopy so you can see where you are and keep your orientation. Whereas in racing, we don't want any extra weight or profile. So everything is cut down, so we can hardly see anything when we're in these race planes. All we want to be able to see is the pylon out the front. So taking off and landing and that sort of stuff actually is quite a challenge in these planes because you can't see anything. Every single gram of weight we put into the aircraft is assessed. Is it valuable or is it not? Is it going to help us go faster, or do we throw it out? So and that actually includes myself as well. That any weight I put on, it's like, what are you doing and why are you doing it? And sometimes it's soul destroying when you go out and you see all your mates having a beer and you're sitting there going, I've got a race coming up and I've got to lose 300 grams.
The planes, I mean, you talk about the chase for weight there before. I mean, even things like decals or paint schemes and things like that, you absolutely try to keep the weight down even with things like that, don't you?
Yeah, for sure, because it's not just the overall weight of the aircraft, it's how the weight's distributed as well. So once again, just like any high performance piece of machinery, there's the total package weight that then is related to traction and power of how fast you can accelerate and how fast you can corner. But on top of that is just as critical is the balance, because the plane is just like the cars, that if there's too much weight down the back, it'll pitch too fast and you can over-G or stall. If the weight's too far up the front, you've got to use too much force to get the plane to turn, which is drag, and it won't corner as well. So we've just gone through a branding change over the break, and the plane is not only heavy, but the weight distribution is poor, and it's got a very heavy back end, which means that...
So you can feel that. You weren't as comfortable as normal because of that. Yeah?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, we actually had 2 over-Gs in training and one over-G in training, 1 over-G in quali, because if you think about it, if the weight is at the back end of the plane, as you start to pitch, the weight wants to keep going and actually makes the plane pitch harder than you're prepared to pitch, and it spikes the G. And, we were getting unheard of acceleration rates, which is 40 G per second, and we're limited to 12 G, and at 40 G per second, that's 1 G added every 25 milliseconds. So I try and go to 11, but with the weight distribution, I got to 12 a few times accidentally because the pitch rates were so high.
Tell people that don't know about the Edge some more data, particularly in relation to engine and things like that.
Okay, yeah. So basically, we're running normally aspirated engines. It's a standardised engine we use in the race, mainly for safety, but also for budget constraints. So we used to be able to do whatever we wanted to the engines, and some people were having.
He says with a smile.
Yeah, and I did quite a bit, and there were a few engine failures from some other teams because they were pushing them so hard. Pushing them like race stuff that we're only going to get 2 or 3 races out of this, and we're going to throw it away, and that puts the budget through the roof, but it also puts the safety at risk as well, because unlike once again track racing, if we lose the donk in the plane, it's a bigger issue than just pulling over on the side of the track.
Oh, by the way, a donk is slang for an engine. It's not a term you often hear these days, but when Matt's chatting about it, he's referring to the engine up front in the plane.
So the engines are standardised, normally aspirated, 540 cubic inches, so that's about 8.5 litres from memory. They're old school technology, these engines. They're so 8.5 litres, but they're only 6 cylinders. They're just your classic horizontally opposed engines, so basically VW style engine, just with 6 pots, but they're big pots. It's a very high torque engine, so we run quite low RPM, so exactly what we run we won't get into, but it's somewhere around 2950 RPM, so 2950. Which doesn't seem that high, but we're pushing up around 350 horsepower on very low RPM, and that's limited as well by the rules and the regs of what we're allowed to do to keep it all safe. It's just normal aviation fuel. We're not allowed to put additives in the oil or anything. What we can do though is we can work fairly hard on cooling systems, which we spend a lot of time working on cooling systems because once again, like most people know that are fine-tuning motorsports, is that cooling is critical for the engine for getting the optimum power, but it's also critical for the total package for drag. That if you can reduce the amount of effort you're putting into cooling the aircraft with robbing external air, which you have to decelerate, cool the engine, then re-accelerate, you can go faster in straight lines if you're not doing that. So we spend a huge amount of effort into both the cooling of the aircraft and also the induction into the engine itself, and we're currently looking at all the normal race stuff of harmonics, looking at volumetric areas in plenums leading into the fuel servos. So all the stuff. I'm lucky. I've got a Formula One expert in my team now who's mapping the engine and all the harmonics in the engine, and we're actually getting more power out of the engine just by changing the design of the intake.
How big's the team? I mean, you have, as you and I talk here, you've just come back from finishing 5th at the opening round, I think it was, and the next is a few weeks away because the Winter Olympics on in between time. They're off to Cannes next, I think. But the plane stays in Europe while you're back here in Australia, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So the plane stays in Europe. We're actually getting some work done to try and balance some of those items we're talking about with the aerodynamics. The team is currently back home again. We've got an all-Australian team at the moment. So it's only 4 of us that are on the road, being myself as, I go there as the boss. I then delegate myself down to being the pilot, so I don't have to concentrate on being the boss and the pilot at the same time. And then I come home back as the boss again. Then we've got my technician, who's responsible for obviously primarily first of all the safety of the aircraft, but then also for doing whatever we can to make it faster. I've got my race tactician, who's responsible for making sure all of our onboard telemetry is working. Then he analyses all of our telemetry and puts forward recommendations to me about what I can do differently in the track, both
just
on the
like
line.
Formula One.
Exactly, and we've got he sits there with data traces and 64 channels at 100 hertz of information that he analyses with all of our GPS plots, and then he'll debrief me after every flight. I'll give him my gut feel, just once again like Formula One. I'll debrief with him and say, this is what I thought, this is what I felt, and then he'll analyse the data and go, you're right here, you're wrong here, and we're going to do this differently. And then I've got a team manager who's running around keeping us all in control. So it's actually quite a small team at the race, and the reason for that is we don't do high-speed pit changes or anything like that. So we don't come running in and do a 2-second tyre change. We come in and we take our time to get the plane turned around. But we've got a lot more people in the background. We've got an aerodynamic design team. We've got in Germany. We've got some more data analysis in Melbourne that help us out, and then I've got the physical team around me as well. So I've got my own personal trainer, sports psychologist, and then all of the back crackers and the physios and all that sort of stuff, because we do we put our bodies under a lot there, and I need that whole team around me. So when I get home, I'm generally all twisted and screwed up, and it's a process for about a week to straighten me up again.
The record books show top 2 results in the World Championship in 2015 and 16, if my memory serves me correctly there. I mean, it is literally the best aerobatic race pilots in the world all coming together. The competition is incredibly tough, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very tight racing. We talk about we no longer talk about how many seconds. A race would be somewhere. The average race is somewhere between probably 55 seconds and maybe a minute and 2, something like that. All the tracks are different around the world, but that's roughly how they go. We no longer talk about seconds. How many seconds did you run on the track? So you won't go, I ran a 55 0.3, you'll say I ran a 0.532, and someone goes, I ran a 0.461, and then you go, geez, and then that, you start talking, bigger decimal places, and it seems like you're way off the pace. In the end, you go, man, I was still like 153 thousandths of a second behind them. It's like 153. Where are we going to find 153 thousandths of a second? When you look at it, the big picture, you go, I can't even start and stop my watch in that much time. We're talking a metre or two in the track, but that's how tight the racing is, because everybody is super capable. And it's one of those things you've sometimes got to slap yourself around when you come back from a race. I come back in 5th place in this last one, and you come back and you're kicking the can, going, bloody hell, I came 5th. I need to do better than that. And you've got to sit back and go, I came 5th by less than 2/10 of a second, and I was racing against all the top guys in the world with highly modified planes, and you go, it's actually pretty good I was just being involved, let alone coming 5th. What I am finding is, the body clock is ticking. It's getting harder every year to strap the plane on. I still think I've got a number of years left in me. It's a matter of care and feeding my body, but we've got a number of years of just concentrating on me and the team being world champion a number of times. But in the background, we are already looking at the evolution of the sport. So up until about now, the sport's always been the Red Bull Air Race gets to pick and choose who comes into the sport. I applied, but they said, yes, you can. And then I ran the team and I owned the team. The evolution that's starting to occur now is that, like any motorsport evolves, is that the team is now established. So rather than a new pilot creating a new team, we will actually pick the pilot who's going to replace me, and we'll maintain the team, which is a win-win for everybody. So a pilot can just walk in, and his primary job, his only job in the world, is to go fast in that plane. Whereas I have to deal with also running the business and that sort of stuff when I do it. So it's a great next level for the person that does replace me. And I'm excited to be involved in a motorsport that's I'm at the ground floor, and it's growing like you wouldn't believe, especially overseas. And it's a very privileged place to be, not only one of the ranked competitors in this growing sport, but also in a position that I can see myself being involved in this sport as long as I want, regardless of my physical ability to get in the cockpit.
Let's talk, before I wrap this up, about, I often ask guests about what's in their garage, either what their dream machine is, what they're restoring perhaps, etc., etc. Let's talk about a couple of cool things that you've flown along the way. Am I right in saying that you've flown a Mustang? What was that thing like?
Yeah, I've flown a Mustang. In fact, it's in my stable. I own a part share in that one, and it's an amazing plane. Huge amount of power, huge amount of noise.
Iconic too.
Oh yeah, so ours is a 2-seater. So we sometimes take people flying, and you quite often as you're getting out of the plane, you'll have grown men and ladies in the back tearing up. And you're just like, oh, now I know what my granddad did. And it's such a raw feeling of power, and it's one of those things that even when I land it, you can't believe that this was handed over to 18 and 19-year-olds to go out and get shot at. It's already hard enough to fly these things well, just concentrating purely on flying it well, let alone flying it well and getting shot at, and you're freezing your butt off at 30-odd thousand feet. So amazing plane, 27 litres of 27-litre engine, V12, 1,600 horsepower, and stub stacks. Flames come out of the exhaust when you're running this thing. It's just so cool. As a motorhead, it is the most amazing thing.
Are there any other resto projects currently in the hangar underway? Or if budget was unlimited, what would you love to have in there?
I like all ends of the spectrum. So we've got a Piper Cub in the hangar getting restored at the moment, which is basically an old rag and tube aircraft used as a trainer during in the 40s, and it's just a fun plane to fly around in. I've always got my eye on other aircraft. I think we've got about 6 or 7 planes at the moment, but I've the boss has stepped in and said that I can't buy any more planes until I've got all the ones I've got flying, which is is quite a challenge because I keep seeing all these really cool projects and go, oh, maybe she won't notice if I just slip that one into the hangar, but she's the bookkeeper, so I think she'll notice.
She'll notice. Is it true you've only ever done one parachute jump, and why is that? Do you think they're mad? That's not something you want to pursue?
Yeah, that is true. I've only done one jump. It was back in the 90s. I did it and I went, yeah, that was kind of cool, but why would you ever not want to land the plane as well? So I'm now business partners with a skydiving company, and I watch them, how much fun they all have, and every now and then I look at it and go, maybe I need to give it another crack, but yeah, I like landing planes.
That is cool.
Yep, this is kind of like where I come to hang out and get all excited, but also shake my head.
We've just walked out into the hangar. You can hear a Robinson helicopter, I think it is, taking off in the background. So, first of all, 3 aircraft that we're looking at in here at the moment. In the Red Bull Kohler colours is your now retired racecraft, because you have a new Edge that we've spoken about. Tell us about this firstly.
Yeah, so this one I started racing in 2010. This is actually the one that I touched the water with. So me and her go way back, and we've had some good and bad experiences together. It's also the plane that I've finished number 2 in the world twice in. So this is my little baby, and we retired her because she had a problem with the wing at the end of one of the seasons, and we thought rather than trying to rapidly fix the wing, we're better off to buy a brand new race plane and take our time to make sure everything's fine with it, because it's once again like it's slightly different to any other motorsport, that if something goes wrong in the track, it could go horribly wrong real quick. So safety is paramount. We weren't quite sure how bad the problem was, so we bought a new race plane. Turns out it's all fixed again now, and she's fine. So she's really now just a demonstration aircraft. She's pretty impressive demonstration.
Very impressive. So we're talking Edge here, aren't we?
This one here is an MXS. So it's the other type of race plane that's used out there, and this one, ultimately they're all about the same. This has got a slightly different construction method, and but they're effectively the same sort of plane.
Okay, what about over to the right-hand side? Blue and yellow, Matt Hall Racing colours. Extra, is that right?
That's exactly right. So this is our 2-seat extra. It's my family model. It carries an extra bum, and this is what we do all of our media and all of our joy flights and all that sort of stuff in. So it's got the same engine and prop setup as the race plane, basically. So still very, very manoeuvrable and very fast. But it just happens to weigh a bit more, and when you look at it, you can see that it's while it still looks very fast and sleek, when you look at it and the race plane together, you go, well, you can see which one's going to go faster. But fun plane, and that's the basically this is the home-based business of where people can come for a run with us.
Single engine prop up front. What's the power plant like? Tell us more.
Yeah, so this is a 300 horse, so very similar to the race plane. We only run this at 2,700 RPM, but it's pulling 300 horsepower, but the plane only weighs about 650 kilos empty. So power to weight ratio is actually pretty damn good with 300 horsepower, because it's very similar power to weight ratio as a V8 supercar. And in fact, some people, if they've been to events around Australia, they've probably seen us either demoing the plane at the supercar races, and I've also raced Jamie Whincup as well on a drag, like on takeoff, with these planes, and we're neck and neck all the way down the straight. He then has to brake for the corner, and I don't.
Now, in the corner being restored, you mentioned your lovely wife, the bookkeeper. She probably wanted you to finish this project. What is it? What are we looking at, and how far before it'll be completed?
This is a Super Cub. It's actually my wife's. She's not a pilot, but I bought it for her. That's how I got away with it. So she couldn't say no when I bought her a nice present. So we're just in a process of restoring it back to brand new condition. It's not that far off being finished. It really just needs a couple of coats of paint here and there. We've got a new engine sitting in the box, got a new prop sitting on the shelf. We've got new instruments sitting on the shelf as well. So we're now just at a matter of bolting everything back together. And it's like everything in life, though, time gets in the way. So we've got a plane that's ready to go. It's just a matter of having time and everything. Every time we think we've got time, something pops up, and the priority is always racing. So that always ends up in the back of the corner. In fact, it's been living there now for 2 years.
What's the age and the history on it, things like that?
Well, this one here is actually fairly new as far as these is concerned. So the design is back in the 1940s, a big training type aircraft. It's probably the most popular designed aircraft in the world, the Piper Cub. This one's called a Super Cub, and it started being produced in about the 60s, and what they call it super because they've just put more power in it. And you see these types of planes a lot in a lot of YouTube videos that get passed around from Alaskan bush pilots, where they're doing these insanely short takeoff and landings. These types of planes can take off and land in 5 meters, and they land them on riverbeds, and they water ski them. They put them down on water and run them along the water because the tires are so big. They're like water skis. So they're fun planes to fly, and you fly around with the door open. You can land them anywhere. You don't need a runway. Just a huge amount of fun, and they're great for teaching people to fly as well. So my son will probably learn to fly in this plane.
How old is he?
He's now 12. He got a bit too cool for flying for a little while there, but now he's starting to look at it and go, it actually is, flying is actually pretty cool. So he's starting to come flying with me again.
Final question for you. Are you a big fan of the history of flying? I mean, I spent, in the last 12 months, I went to Washington and went to the Smithsonian there, which is dedicated to flying and space travel and things like that. I mean, it's just amazing. An original Wright brothers plane in there. That sort of stuff's hugely. I sense in you. You love all of that.
Yeah, for sure. It's when you're growing up, you're always looking back in history, and everything that happened before you were born seems like it was so long ago. And so obviously, I've looked at, when I was growing up, aviation's just always been around. I always knew that the first flight was the 17th of December 1903, but that was so long ago it's not funny. And then I went to the centenary of that in the US when I was living there, and they reenacted the first flight. And now, as it turns out, I've been alive for approaching half of the history of aviation, and you go, wow, it's actually a very young activity still to be involved in the development of it. And I look at what people have done in the past, and all the test pilots who broke the sound barrier, and you go to the Smithsonian and you read all their stories, and then you go down to Cape Canaveral and go through who's got all the rockets and what they've been doing, and how hard they've pushed themselves. And it's just unbelievable what humans have done in aviation in such a short time. And it still blows me away every time I read a story about it.
On the next episode of Rusty's Garage, we speak to Australian Motorsport Hall of Famer Tim Schenken, who took a chance and hopped on a boat in the 1960s to England to hopefully become a Formula One driver.
But we got all the way to the truck, into the truck. Peter Shetty there, he was in a hell of a state because Enzo Ferrari had come up the night before to meet me. They'd had to stay overnight.
You brushed Enzo Ferrari?
Well, I didn't know I'd brushed him off until that moment. So still with my overalls on, they took me immediately to a village just near Monza, and into the dining room there in the back corner was Enzo Ferrari. So with an interpreter, I did my deal there. So they probably thought I was super cool, but frankly, I thought I was being tricked.
Rusty's Garage is written and presented by me, Greg Rust. Series producer and editor is Alex Mitchell. Audio production by Darcy Thompson.
Listener.